Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have a whole bunch to cover today. We're going to be doing our NBA midseason awards, but on YouTube, that's going to be a separate clip because we have to talk about the breaking news of the day. Pascal Siakam, you are an Indiana Pacer. The trade just broke about an hour ago. It's actually a 3-team deal, sends Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, and 3 first-rounders to the Raptors. The Pelicans sent Kyra Lewis to the Raptors and a second to the Pacers. And Indiana, of course, gets Spicy P. Logan, how much does this move the needle for you with the Pacers? How do you feel about this for them?
It's a pretty huge acquisition. I really like it for Indiana, Carson, especially considering that they didn't give up a ton of value. You know what? They give up Nwora, they give up Bruce Brown, and they give up 3 first-round picks. And I know what you're thinking, too. 3 first-round picks is no small asking price. That's a lot of capital to give up for the future. But considering where the Pacers are, I think it's a really good investment. Siakam has already said that he is going to re-sign with Indiana long-term once they get, he gets into the town, gets all settled down. He wants to be there long-term. And they already have their building block of the future in Tyrese Haliburton. You know what I mean? You're not looking and searching for that guy actively in the draft. So I think what better way to pair him up with a real star-level player and a guy that I think is really going to complement Tyrese Haliburton really well. First of all, what these guys are going to do in the pick and roll and in the pick and pop game. He's an 81st percentile pick and roll man. Siakam is. You pair that up with one of the best passing point guards in all of basketball. I think they could really complement each other. I also think that, Carson, this is an Indiana team that I think needs more veterans and needs more physical guys. And I think Siakam checks both of those boxes. He's a guy that's going to be able to rebound really well for you. Another big, switchable, athletic guy on the wings. It's just really invaluable to have. And I think he takes some of the offensive pressure off of Haliburton. You know what I mean? He's got a really big burden on his shoulders running the offense 100% of the time, always having the ball in his hands. Siakam can also be a secondary playmaker and ball handler when you need him to be. And I think you referenced this in a video you already broke down for social media, but it just gets them that much closer to getting one more asset to where they're really contending. Again, you think about the building blocks on this team. Haliburton, Mathurin, Walker, Miles Turner. Now they have Siakam. You have the building blocks of a really young, athletic team that's it doesn't feel that far away. I think you're right. I think they need obviously Indiana has to get better defensively, and they're still a very young team, but it feels like they could be one move away to where they have a sort of big 3. Again, just with the value that they gave up and where they are as a franchise right now, I think Indiana crushed this trade, and I think it's mutually beneficial. Toronto gets to lean more into their rebuild. They have picks for the future, assets. I think this is a mutually beneficial trade, but I think the Pacers won.
I love this for Indiana, and I think it's worth digging even a little bit deeper into the specifics of the value because it's not just 3 firsts. People would say, well, you're dealing this for a guy at the deadline who has said, I want to test free agency. I don't know where you saw him say that he wants to be in Indiana. I haven't seen that, but I have seen the Pacers reporting that they're confident that they will be able to re-sign him. And you have to think that there's some level of confidence there. There's some assurance from Siakam. Otherwise, I don't think that they would make this move. But again, the context of those 3 firsts. 2 of them are in this very draft. One of them is in Indiana's, which will probably be hovering around the 20th pick. And the other one is going to be the lesser of OKC, Houston, or Utah's pick. That's going to be the Thunder's pick. That's going to be in the mid to very likely late 20s. So 2 picks probably in the 20s this year in what is considered one of the weakest draft classes ever. I haven't personally really dug into it yet, but that is what we have been hearing for quite some time about this class. And then a 2026 first from Indiana, when they're still going to be really good, that pick is going to be in the 20s. So I'm not losing sleep over that if I'm the Pacers. At some point, you got to get serious. And I really like Jarris Walker as a prospect, but I mean, that was your 8th pick. He's not playing right now. You are going to now be picking dudes in the 20s, and you're going to value that over an immediate star who fits very cohesively on your roster when you have your number 1 star, and at some point you got to start putting real winning pieces around him. I would just disagree with that philosophically. I think this is absolutely the right move, and it's not just adding a player of Siakam's caliber. He is a fantastic fit here because this is a pace and space offense. And there have been few more consistently great transition scorers in the NBA over the last few years than Spicy P. He's just an awesome athlete in the open floor. And one of the things that has arguably hindered him, his efficiency, has been playing in spacing hell, playing alongside a non-shooting five, playing alongside another clunky forward like Scotty Barnes. Even though he's been shooting the ball much better this year, that wasn't the case the last couple years. Playing this year with really non-shooting guards before IQ got there. And at the same time, it is a limitation of his own. Yes, he has the ability to knock down the occasional three, but he's going to shoot in the low 30s from there. He's not necessarily a big floor spacing positive. But if you put him in a spread out situation like this, where you can regularly play 5 out and where he's not really hurting your spacing and isn't being hurt by your spacing, that to me is just the ideal offensive situation for Siakam, because that is where he can attack those mismatches. He has consistently improved in terms of his post polish. In isolation, he is a problem athletically and skilled enough as a finisher and has such great body control that he is going to cook most dudes in those situations. And I think that he fits nicely with Hallie. He's never leaned in to being like a role man necessarily. He's done a bit of that. It's never been an emphasis in his game. So I wouldn't be super optimistic that Hallie just unlocks that. I think some dudes are wired how they're wired, but I think there's some potential for a two-man game there out of pick and roll. But regardless, he's a great play finisher, and Hallie is a great playmaker. He is a creator. So putting another dude alongside him who doesn't need to have the ball, who will be effective just with his athleticism, running the floor in transition, who is a smart cutter, all of this stuff, can attack matchups quickly, is a really nice fit for Hallie. But at the same time, this is a dude who can take some burden off of him and can get his own shot and can create for others, which ultimately, I love what Hallie has done, making this offense so elite this year, and the combination of awesome shooting and good athletes around the rim with just his ability to dictate every possession has been a great formula. But when it comes to playoff settings, you need another dude who can be a high-level threat himself. Hallie may be able to dissect traps. He may be able to deal with you throwing multiple guys at him consistently. Now, we saw the Lakers have some effect blitzing him and just getting the ball out of his hands, but he's generally really, really good in those situations. But you just need another dude who can go out there and deliver himself in big spots. And Siakam is that. And he's been giving you 22 points and 5 assists a game this year on 60% true shooting in like one of the clunkiest offensive situations in the league. And then he absolutely fits here on the other side of the ball too, because we all know it, man. Rick Carlisle said it best. You can't date the Pacers. It gets boring because they can't stop anybody. And Spicy P isn't necessarily some all-world defender, but he's big, he's athletic, he's long, he brings some rebounding value on the interior. He is a hell of a lot more serious in that front court than Obi Toppin is. And they just ultimately need to take significant strides defensively if they want to ever be a real contender. And this move singularly does not get them there. That was not the timeline for this team, but I think it gets them a move away. If you add a real high quality third player here, then I think you start talking about them in those conversations. I think the fit is really good, and I do like what this team has done on the margins, developing a guy like Aaron Nesmith, right? Even Andrew Nembhard. Like, the Pacers have good basketball players, but they certainly needed a number 2 of Spicy P's caliber, and for that reason, I love this for them.
So you said that you didn't love this for the Raptors. Do you think they absolutely bungled this trade by waiting so long to deal Siakam?
So I don't have a problem necessarily with the value that they got. Bruce Brown is a guy who has much more value in a win now context. I don't know if maybe he's a guy who they can flip to a team that is trying to get that one piece who could put them over the top. We obviously saw how much he meant to Denver this past year, how hotly he was pursued in free agency. 3 firsts to me, when the alternative is this guy just walks in the offseason. From that perspective, even if it is a less valuable 3 firsts than average, that's not bad value. But I absolutely think this should have been done 2 years ago. And OG, I thought they got pretty good value for. But could they have gotten more a couple years ago? Potentially. This to me is the more glaring instance where you saw teams understood the power dynamics here. And they were telling you, no, we won't give up Jonathan Kuminga. The Pacers apparently had Jalen Smith as an untouchable guy. Like, you couldn't have had that sort of bargaining power over the Raptors if this was 2 years ago and they still had control over him and they didn't think that he was going to walk. And they should have done this because 3 years ago, you could even argue, like, this team has consistently been mediocre. They have consistently been incapable of putting together a competent half-court offense because they've lacked enough high-end skill there. And that has been plain to see. And after they traded OG, they obviously had to do this. But yes, this should have been done a while ago.
For Indiana, I mean, I just want your hypothetical, Carson, because I know your bag goes deep full of players that you could point to that would fit in this context. I think you're right. I don't think Indiana's that far away. I honestly think Hallie is your 1, Siakam is your 3, Turner is your 4. Again, I think they need more athleticism. I think they need more big guys down the rotation. Like, they're just...
Yeah.
They need to be more physically imposing, and they need to dominate on the inside more. So I still think that Indiana needs more big athletes. They need more defenders, point blank, period.
Yep.
Is there anybody that you think that fits as an ideal number 2 in this context? Again, Siakam 3, Turner 4, Hallie is your 1. Like, is there anybody that really you think fits? Because, I mean, that second guy has to be a 2 or a 3, right?
Well, if you're talking about better than Siakam, man, that's a pretty high-tier player. I think that with Siakam as your number 2, you can go pretty far, and I think that that's the mold that they're set to be in for a bit at least. But I agree with you. I think that you are really looking at, and I love this guy, but sort of an upgraded Aaron Nesmith, a guy who maybe has a little bit more offensive pop to his game, is maybe a little bit bigger and physically imposing, but in that mold of a really high-level 3-and-D wing. I still like Turner holding down the 5, and Siakam now gives you a different look where, okay, if you want to play like highly skilled center, 5-out basketball, more of a small ball look, you can run Spicy P at the 5. It's not going to be great for your defense, but offensively, that is a hell of a look, and you didn't have that dynamic previously. And I still think Benedict Mathurin has a pretty rare combination of athleticism and shooting ability. So if he continues to grow into his game and he becomes a lethal, let's say, number 3 scorer, that's what's so interesting about this team is they have guys who are very much on different timelines. They have your established veterans like Miles Turner and Buddy Hield and now Spicy P, and then you have your core guys who are very young and very much trending upwards. So I think that it is going to be really solidifying the wing, getting a stud guy there, and then I think they have the size and the skill in their front court, and they have the superstar talent in their backcourt.
Yeah, and it'll be really about filling out the rest of the bench and seeing what pieces you have. I like Nembhard off the bench, like you mentioned. I like Nesmith. Nesmith probably could fetch you some value, too, if you wanted to make an upgrade, because he has been balling. This was really unexpected. I was not expecting this news to break right here, right now, all of a sudden. But it makes the East a lot more interesting. Let me ask you this. If they don't make another move, if this is what Indiana rocks with the rest of the way, does this drastically change your expectations for them in the postseason?
It gives them a hell of a lot more of a puncher's chance. I think that with their defensive limitations, I would have confidently told you when we're talking about the other teams in this same tier, like the Heat are a cut above because they have 2 established stars. They have this really established defensive identity. The Knicks post-OG, they have their 2 shot creators, established defensive identity. And now I think that the Pacers are firmly alongside those teams because now they have the 2-star talents and their supporting cast is good. It's complementary. They shoot the hell out of the ball. They run. They don't defend very well, but I do like the depth here. I think the bench, they have multiple ball handlers. I've always been a TJ McConnell guy. I'm always going to be a TJ McConnell guy. I think that dude can run a second unit. So I like the Pacers a lot. And again, it would be remarkable if this move got them to beat the Boston Celtics or the Bucks. But outside of that, I couldn't totally write it off. And for them to be at that stage right now is pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. The one last thing that I do think needs to be touched on here, outside of the scope of either of these teams, is the suitors who missed out on Spicy P. I think that this hurts for the Mavs because I think that he would have been an awesome fit there. But I think that this all but ends the Golden State Warriors season and reasonably any upside that they have of making any sort of playoff noise. I think that title window was closed, but they needed to bring in a skilled big forward who could also provide some size and ideally some two-way value. And Siakam was the guy who was most reasonable to target there. I would say Markkanen was the ideal fit, but I think it's become increasingly clear that it would take a lot to get the Jazz to move him, especially with how well they are playing right now. And so if those two guys are off the table, especially painful because you made this whole thing about how you wouldn't give up Jonathan Kuminga in a deal like that, they're just done. I mean, they're not playing good basketball, and they have too many fundamental limitations now. I have been a Warriors optimist, but that has been contingent for some time upon them actually pooling these assets to make a move that fills this very clear need. And if they can't do that, how does this team win a playoff series? They got to get into the playoffs first, but very disappointing for them.
Yeah, I wonder if the Warriors even knew this was going on, because I don't know, dude. It seems like the Dubs could still put together, could have put together a better package than what the Pacers put together. You know what I mean?
Jonathan Kuminga would be a more intriguing asset than any of these picks.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Kuminga is going to be a star, but what we've seen from him, that play finishing alone, that athleticism, that unique athleticism that he possesses, I think the guy's going to be a good NBA player. I think he's already had really good moments this year versus 3 picks in the 20s in a bad draft class.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. But it's what we've talked about previously. If they are committed to Kuminga, then you are screwing over any chance that you have of making the most of this Steph timeline. And I think that is a mistake, even though it's very hard for me to see them unlocking some sort of title ceiling with the assets they could have moved, even if they brought in a Siakam or a Markkanen. But again, it's about developing a puncher's chance. And when Steph is clearly frustrated and Steph is talking about how something has to change, we got to make a move, we're just not good enough, and you don't deliver for the greatest player in your franchise history, I tend to think that is not the right way to go about things.